I'm in Midtown Manhattan, as busy as a place as ever in the city that never sleeps. But just days before Christmas 1980, during the busiest time of the year, the area was under siege by a madman. The killer that the press had called the Midtown Slasher had stabbed 6 black men in the heart, killing 4 of them in just over 12 hours. However, his murderous rampage didn't begin here in New York City. In fact, it started months earlier, just over 300 miles away in Buffalo, New York, where he was known as the .22 caliber killer. For Inside Edition Digital, I'm Sal Bono, and this is New York Gritty.
New York City in the 1980s was pretty much a hellhole carryover from the 1970s. But the year 1980 was particularly gruesome for citizens here. The city was pretty much on edge all the time because of the rising crime.
1,784 homicides. And we're starting off the new year with at least 10 murders in the city today.
So on December 23rd, 1980, 2 days before Christmas, 1 day before Christmas Eve, there was a series of stabbings throughout Midtown, 5 of them, a few hours apart in most cases. At first, because it wasn't the internet age where everyone just goes on Citizen's app or checks their news scroll, a lot of people, including the police, did not connect the dots. But there was a stabbing at 12 o'clock, a few minutes before noon. And remember, this is December 23rd in Midtown, so the city is vibrant and alive. Tourists, people at lunchtime, the usual Midtown traffic. And suddenly, at about 11:45, some guy gets off a train with 7th and West 14th Street, gets off a train and gets stabbed right in the heart and drags himself to a nearby hospital. A couple of hours later, a few blocks away, same thing happens. A couple of hours after that, same thing happens. And this noon to midnight massacre just proceeded, where 5 people were stabbed, 4 of them fatally, right there that day. Only the first guy who was stabbed, I guess because he had a thick coat, even though it penetrated his aorta, the knife blade, he was able to make it to the hospital like that, and he survived. And so suddenly by the next day, the cops, the NYPD, they made the connection, and they thought it was just like some crazy, not a serial killer at that point, but just some guy, some emotionally disturbed person on a rampage. And the city was on tenterhooks.
While the Midtown Slasher was on the loose, the NYPD began to pick up patterns in the stabbings.
That racism was still alive. The cops didn't want to initially say that it was racially motivated, but it was just too much to ignore. There were 5 victims, 4 of them were black men, young black men. 1 of them was a dark-skinned Hispanic. Right there's a pattern, and that's what a good detective will look for, is some sort of pattern, even in a random crime like this. So as soon as that came out, maybe a day later, 2 days later, they were looking for some sort of bigot.
While the NYPD began their investigation, just over 300 miles away in Buffalo, New York, police there were dealing with something eerily similar.
1980, Buffalo was going through hard times. We lost Bethlehem Steel. We were in tough economic times, and especially in the inner city. Hard times for the inner city. We have a segregated inner city. Buffalo is a city of ethnic neighborhoods to begin with. But there is institutional racism. There is all over the country, but we have it too in Buffalo.
That's America. It's as American as apple pie when you talk about the racial tensions that you see today.
Months before the attacks in Midtown Manhattan on September 22nd, 1980, in Buffalo, Glenn Dunn, a black 14-year-old, was shot and killed by a .22 caliber rifle.
Within the next 36 hours after that murder, 3 black men ranging in age from 30 to 43 were killed the same way. Weeks after the shootings, in early October 1980, 2 cab drivers were attacked and their hearts were cut out of their chests. When you first heard about the killing and murder of unarmed black men in Buffalo in 1980, what was your reaction?
Horror, unsolved murders, horrific murders, including 2 taxi drivers were murdered, their hearts were cut out. That's how horrific these crimes were. It was a tough time for reporters to cover that as well, because there was a lot of fear in the inner city and mistrust. We were actually given bulletproof vests to go out and cover the story.
Wow.
It was sort of like a situation where those types of fears settled on Buffalo. We say no! We say no! And you had a situation where there was palpable fear. People were arming themselves. I was afraid, but I was also raising issues.
As investigations were underway in Buffalo and then in New York City, James Pitts, who was elected to city council and was part of the NAACP chapter in Buffalo, acted and called for peace in the city to curb fears. What was created were a series of events known as Unity Day.
The purpose in developing those kinds of events was to not only bring the community together, to strengthen it, to show that there's support, but there was also an effort to reach out and say, look, come join us, the diversity. You have the separation of suburbs and city neighborhoods, etc., but we're all in this together. Openly, there are tensions, but if you really need help, you'd be surprised at the people who would come from different neighborhoods to help you. So that unity was there, that strength was there.
Will be limited at this time to a role supportive of the local law enforcement investigation that has been conducted up until this point. It will also be designed to keep the FBI headquarters and the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. fully apprised of all developments as they arise and to cover out-of-state leads as they develop.
While the mystery remained as to who was the Midtown Slasher and the .22 caliber killer, the FBI even got involved, making it the largest criminal investigation in the state of New York's history at that time.
And that's when they started to connect the 2 crimes. Had it stayed only a gunman up there, maybe they wouldn't have made that connection unless they got lucky, the police, I'm saying. But once it turned to a knife crime, a stabbing, and in the heart, and according to news articles of the time, the murderer in Buffalo cut their hearts out and took them home as trophies. Now they figured, okay, he just moved it south. He just went to New York to get more victims.
Yet the big break in the case came in early 1981, 3 months after the shootings in Buffalo and less than a month after the stabbings in Manhattan.
The first suspect was a man named Joseph Christopher, who happened to be a recent Army recruit, a soldier, when he was arrested for stabbing a fellow soldier in a fight.
While stationed in Fort Benning in Georgia, a 25-year-old Army recruit named Joseph Christopher from Buffalo, New York, was arrested for stabbing a black soldier in an unprovoked attack. While placed in a stockade at Fort Benning, Christopher tried to die by suicide, but survived, and then told a psychiatrist at the base that he, quote, had to, end quote, kill black men in Buffalo and New York City. It was the closest authorities would ever get to a motive, and once the admission came in, word was sent to police in both cities.
You know, if you're talking about particularly African Americans, it's not something new that you would have the kind of racial tensions during that period of time and now. But when we heard that there was a connection, you know, that there might be a connection and that there was a connection between this guy and what happened, particularly in Buffalo, then our concern shifted to, all right, how are we going to punish this guy and make him accountable for what he has done or alleged what he has done? And then that raised the other issue. We've always been part of a judicial system that was not necessarily friendly to us as well.
Mark Mahoney was one of the lawyers assigned to Christopher.
For me, having a guilty client is not a problem. Having a completely innocent client, that's the problem. You know, those are the ones you lose sleep over. In this case, there's huge questions about this. Everybody could see right away that this wasn't a wrapped up, neat and tidy, slam dunk case. and where it was really important that lawyers are involved in fighting the public bias and the public consensus that this guy has to be guilty and we've got to convict him, and make sure that the defense doesn't get rolled over by all the government agencies involved in the case and by the DA's office and or by the judges. And so this, I think you'll find most committed criminal defense lawyers are there to defend the system in the sense of making it work, making the criminal justice system an actual tool by which we can avoid convicting innocent people and avoid convicting other people of more than what they actually are responsible for. So I had no qualms whatsoever. It was clearly Christopher himself, apart from the case, was a puzzle, and you have to deal with that and figure out how to do with it. And I don't know that I would be any better prepared today than I was then for dealing with somebody like Joseph Christopher. He was a conundrum, and you could see everybody that had real involvement in the case at times where they just saw just him as a puzzle. And of course, we have the doctors and so on who looked closely at him, and they had big disagreements, sort of, but no qualms whatsoever about it. And there's nobody I've ever regretted representing at all, and I feel that the bigger risk is that innocent people get convicted. But you really, to protect them, you need to make the system really work hard to get any conviction.
You had equated him, Christopher, to a puzzle, an enigma. Why is that? What was it like being around him when you tried to question him, when you and Kevin were trying to question him? Like, was he just like not responsive? Was he aloof? Like, what was it?
The conversations with Joseph were off, unless there was something specific that he wanted, were actually generally pretty cryptic. We really couldn't get any information out of him about anything, really. We were pretty much on our own, which is why we raised this issue of competency. I know he saw his mother, but he didn't really talk to his mom about what was going on. We had him for a while kept in the infirmary, and there were some pretty good people there who were the nursing staff who kept an eye on him. I don't really have memory except spending quite a bit of time there working with us and talking to him about the case and what we were doing, and keep him up to speed as to what the proceeding was going to be like and where things were going. But it wasn't an interactive deal. We weren't getting information from him really about anything that was going to be helpful to us. We try to engage him with questions about growing up, about where he might have been, if not where the killings had happened. There were a lot of reasons to believe that somebody else was involved, and that more than one person was involved in this at one time or another. Very interested in knowing about that, but I don't really have a memory of getting any productive or useful information from Joseph throughout the time.
He waived the jury trial. Why is that?
I think he was, remember, we've gone through competency hearings and not having competency hearings. I think he just got scared when they started bringing a bunch of people for jury selection, and I just think that he couldn't explain why.
Christopher would appear with a bulletproof vest when he walked into court, and at one point he wore a ski mask.
When I saw that, I wish I was there. I would like to snatch the mask off of him and kick it. That little smirk on his face, just having that kind of reaction to seeing that, even as you look at all of the situation, not only at that time, but now. Obviously, there's a process, there's a judicial process, etc. Everybody has to have their rights. But, when you have a clear situation, of course, everyone's entitled to their trial, and we understand that. The community's response is, the evidence is there, he's done it. You're going through the court process, snatch the mask off his face. Make the guy accountable and quit bull and get it done.
It would be revealed that prior to the killings in Buffalo and New York City, Christopher sought mental health treatment but was denied.
What bothers me, again, is the issue of him wanting to get psychiatric help and being told that there's nothing wrong with him. And shortly after, the crimes began to happen. I have to think that that there was a failure in the mental health system. He actually sought help and didn't get it.
In April 1982, Joseph Christopher was found guilty in a Buffalo court for second-degree murder in the deaths of 14-year-old Glenn Dunn, 30-year-old Emmanuel Thomas, and 32-year-old Harold Green.
Everybody was happy that he was guilty, but then you can't forget the victims.
Right.
But we need to make sure that this situation does not happen again.
Absolutely. Did you ever meet with the victims' families at that time?
Well, we brought in some of the relatives of some of the victims to talk about them during some of the meetings of the Black Leadership Forum, but that was done very privately.
Christopher was sentenced to 60 years to life in prison.
I remember going to see Joseph, and he really had no real reaction to this either.
Wow.
He didn't want to talk about it. I don't know what kind of impression it made on him. I think he was resigned to the fact he's going to be in jail for a long time. I don't think he ever had any hope of getting off. I don't think he ever thought that something different was going to happen.
Did he ever give you or tell you a motive as to why he committed these crimes?
No, and I don't think he ever said anything like that. He was mentally ill, and I don't think motive had much to do with it. Now, he did come from a background. There are many people that testified that his father was extremely racist and bigoted, and so that there may have been no surprise that he's killing black and brown people here in New York City. But again, I don't know if that's a motive. What if that made it a motive for him to kill anybody?
My reaction to that is that anybody that does that is mentally ill anyway. Whatever the cause was, whether they were raised, etc., what difference does that make? They were insane. You gotta be insane to do something like that. I mean, if you talk about cutting somebody their heart out, or just walking up in a supermarket parking lot and just shooting somebody through a paper bag, or you have a situation where that person just randomly, all of a sudden, just stabs somebody or goes after somebody for whatever reason. Of course, there's something wrong with them. But in my view, the importance of the issue is that he's a murderer. He was convicted. If he had schizophrenia, okay, that could be a reason, but he's still a murderer. He should be punished. He should be punished. He should not necessarily be institutionalized, etc., to receive treatment. He should be punished.
Well, it ranks high. It was a terrible moment in our city's history. We got through it together. I tried to focus my reports on coming together as opposed to tearing us apart, and to try to allay the fears. It ranks very, very high, and it will always be that way. The city, we got through it. We got through it together, and it brought us closer for a while. And I think there are lessons in there we can always look back on to see how we can come together in the face of adversity.
In 1985, the murder convictions in Buffalo were overturned. Christopher was retried and found guilty of manslaughter for the 3 killings in Buffalo, but he was also found guilty of murder and attempted murder of 2 men in New York City, for which he would be given a life sentence. While in prison, Christopher boasted about the atrocities he committed and claimed that he had killed more. However, this has never been proven. In 1993, Christopher died behind bars after developing a rare form of breast cancer.
Am I supposed to feel sympathy or what have you? No. What happened in my mind is that, all right, here's a person that's still alive that, had the opportunity to develop a disease or what have you. Whereas those victims who were shot to death and killed, they're gone. They were gone a long time. He lived on, and those families are still hurting.